Okay, thank you, Chris. All right, hi everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our session here in just a moment. My name is Danny Cook, and I'm going to be moderating our session today. You are currently in When You Make the News, Leadership Response and Trauma-Informed Support After Violent Incidents. We're glad to welcome John, Nina, and Nicole today. Before we get started, we're just going to go over our few logistical items. This session is being recorded today. Captions are available during the session if you click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We do ask that you please use the Q&A feature for any questions during the presentation. We'll address them at the end of the presentation. And of course, please do upvote those questions that you'd like to see answered. The chat is always popping, so feel free to use that for general comments if you have any technical issues. We're joined here today by Chris, who will also be monitoring the session for any technical help. And Chris is also adding some links into the chat. As always, there's one for our collaborative resource sharing. So if you think of something that's related to this topic that you think folks would benefit from, please do put that in our Zotero. And we also have Heather here to help with our code of conduct. That link will be in the chat as well. So we're going to turn off our welcome slide now and hand it over to our great presenters. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Danny. Let me go ahead and share our slides. Does that look like where we need to be? Everybody seeing the slideshow, title slide? All
Yes.
right, let's get underway. Welcome. Thanks so much for coming to our session today. As Danny mentioned, it's called When You Make the News, Leadership Response and Trauma and Support After Violent Incidents. So my name is Nina McHale, she, her pronouns. I'm Associate Dean for Student and Scholar Services at the University of Denver University Libraries. And my fabulous co-presenters are John Copeland, who is a student circulation assistant in the Access Services Department, and Nicole Cortez Nevarez, who is the supervisor for Access Services in Circulation. Um, I'd like to call attention to the fact that they both are MLIS candidates and will be on the job market soon. And as loath as I would be to lose either of them, you'll have a really great sense of how calm under pressure these two are by the end of our session today. So just a little shameless plug for my colleagues here. So just a little bit before we dive into it, just to tell you a little bit about who we are, where we are, etc. University of Denver is a mid-sized private university. We're a recent R1 edition. We got our R1 status in 2022. We have about 13,000 students. That's pretty equally split between undergrad and graduate. Slightly more, about maybe 500 more undergrad right now at this time. We are urban, but we're not in, if you're familiar with Denver, we're not downtown Denver. That not to be confused with the University of Colorado, Denver, which is downtown. We are the private University of Denver. You'll hear us refer to the university libraries, but also the Anderson Academic Commons, or the AAC. That is the building that most of the library staff are housed in. We have some building partners too. It's a pretty typical commons model, writing center, tutoring center, that kind of thing. And university libraries is the library staff across a couple of buildings. So we'll use those kind of interchange. You'll see those used kind of interchangeably throughout. Okay. I think that's all my intro context info, so let's jump in. So, if you read our the abstract for our session, you'll know that August 16th last year was a pretty eventful day for us. This is just sort of a sample of how we made the news. You can see most of the local Denver outlets: arrest made after stabbing at University of Denver Library, man arrested after stabbing at University of Denver Library. Stabbing at DU's library results in one arrest. So we're going to talk about what happened that day, and we're gonna frame it in the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, uh, in their framework, their principles. 5/6, more about that in a second, in the in their principles of trauma-informed care. And we're kind of using that as like a rubric of like what we did well, things that we need to work on for the future, that kind of thing. We're going to go through how each of us experienced the event. And how the communications and how the media coverage shaped how we then in turn had to communicate after the event. And we'll close out with I'll give kind of a summary of those principles at first in case folks aren't familiar with them, and then we'll return to them at the end after we kind of give you the full story of the day. So we'll have an analysis of our collective response in that framework. Just a disclaimer, we're not experts in trauma-informed care. We wanted to use this as a framework again to kind of explore how we thought we did in response and what we could do for the future. And then we'll finish up again. We'll go through John, Nicole, Nina, and share what the takeaways were, what the really sort of personal kind of lessons learned throughout this in each of our roles. Just a couple of content warnings. There's potentially some uncomfortable topics related to safety in the library workplace. We understand that if you're in that there are very likely audience members who have been involved in violent incidents. And we will have a very brief, but I promise not graphic description of the event and also of the crime scene. But obviously, if at any point you need to make self-care your priority, you will not hurt our feelings at all if you need to leave the session. That's completely fine. We understand. All right. So a little bit more about kind of the space we're exploring here. So chances are everyone in this call right now has done active harm training at least once, right? It's ubiquitous on college campuses, in workplaces, unfortunately, anymore. And the focus of active harm training, which as it should be, is how to survive a life-threatening situation. My husband just retired from a career with the intelligence community, and they call that getting off the X, getting yourself out of danger. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about this. Well, what happens? There's sort of that weird limbo period after, okay, the scary thing is doesn't seem like it's happening anymore. The campus safety and or the police are here. There's this kind of we found ourselves in this kind of weird limbo zone. And again, that's kind of what we wanted to talk about is what happens there and how you can ensure everyone is getting what they need. So it's kind of the gap between the run, hide, fight, again, the immediate threat, and observe and report what you're seeing to campus safety and or the police. So the three of us like to think that the trauma-informed part of all of this is how each of us in our roles are going to share how we experience the same event and the lessons we learned. There's going to be a lot of overlap. Obviously, the three of us learned a lot of very similar things, but we have very different perspectives, again, too, based on what happened. And we'll highlight those differences in our experiences, and they each have kind of their own levels and range of impact. All right. Sorry, before we get into that, a couple more preface things. Again, this is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 5 or 6 key principles of trauma-informed care. I won't read them word for word, but they're safety, peer support, trustworthiness and transparency. Those are the first 3. And then we have collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice, and choice. And then the last one, the number 6. So this is a government organization, and if you look at the Wikipedia article, there are 6 principles. If you look at the .gov website, this last one is left off: cultural, historical, and gender issues. I don't know for sure. I have a theory that was removed in the past year or so because it is a DEI topic, but we are not going to shy away from that. We are going to talk about that. And there's a link for more information at that .gov website. We picked this one because they do a lot. They're not the only, obviously, they're not the only organization that talks about trauma-informed care. And in fact, there's been a lot of work in the library world recently about that. But we liked this framework again, kind of as a way to evaluate. All right, so with that, let's go back to August 16th, 2025. And John, tell us what you experienced.
Morning, everybody. Glad to be here. So yeah, I was Back on August 16th, I was a new hire, circulation assistant work study, starting out my MLS program at DU. I arrived to training that first day at 10 a.m. or so, and had already gone over several steps with Nicole, my immediate supervisor. Uh, like Dina was saying, we are a private university, but the AAC is open to the public, and we often get visitors who are not affiliated with the university. In addition, we also still have a lot of alumni that come in and speak to us. So a little bit of the layout of the building itself. We have the main floor once you walk into the building, and then we have a lower floor and an upper level. Um, so at the time of this event last summer, the building was unlocked, open for business on normal summer hour schedule. And slide. So there's a quick picture of kind of what our circulation lobby looks like. To the left there, you can kind of see the stairwell leading to the upper and lower levels. And on the far right there, you see our circulation desk. Slide. So first, it all started with an alumni just kind of casually walking by the front desk and in a kind of uh, a surprised manner just said, "Hey, there's two guys fighting downstairs." And I had just kind of finished my training rounds, and Nicole was at the desk, was kind of like shocked at this, and was like, "Oh, what?" And he was like, "Yeah, there's two guys fighting downstairs." So then the young one starts to walk out, and Nicole goes over to the security cameras to look, and there it is on the lower level, a silent fight happening on the security cameras. So as this is happening, a student runs up to the desk from downstairs in a more distressed state and says that there's a fight going on downstairs and that one of the individuals had stated that they had a gun. So at that moment, Nicole had the student come back behind the desk, go to the break room to give statements later, but also just safety reasons. And we started contacting campus safety to I think right about the time when we saw the fight happen on the camera was when we started calling campus safety, if I remember correctly. And then as we got the notification that there was a gun, that was also passed on the phone in real time. Slide. So while all this is happening, the fight kind of ends on its own without us knowing. One person goes and barricades themselves into a restroom, while the other person just wants to leave the library. The only way in and out the library is on that main level of the circulation desk. So as we were kind of just sitting there and Nicole was communicating with campus safety, this person walks in front of the desk, and I noticed there's a rag wrapped around the hand, and blood is just kind of all in the rag. So seeing this person just leaving, I was like, hey man, what's going on? And I kind of offered the first aid kit that we had behind the desk, which at that time also campus safety showed up and helped out with aid. Uh, I'd say maybe within the window of about 30 minutes, we had more campus safety officers show up, more Denver PD show up. Um, and then eventually the person that was in the restroom was taken out, arrested, and taken away. And within this time frame as well, we had our leadership from the library show up to just kind of speak with us. And then they made the decision to close the library for the day and pay us all. So that was nice.
All right. Now I think Nicole, you're up. Yep.
So a lot of this will overlap to what John said, but this is more so from my perspective. So when the fight was reported, I immediately went to go check the security cameras because they were just right behind the desk. I wanted to make sure that it was actually a fight. I initially thought it might have been just two students roughhousing, which wouldn't be too extreme of a thought, given the college campus. But I went, saw the security cameras, and there in fact was a fight. Furniture was being knocked over, people were pushing, and so yeah, I attempted to call campus safety through our very new Microsoft Teams phones that we had just switched to, but they had just reset and all of the pre-programmed numbers were erased. So I ended up having to look up the number and call from my personal cell phone, which took a little bit because service is also not the best in the building. While I was giving the initial report to the dispatcher, that's when we had the students run up to the desk and tell the CAs about the fight and that they heard that one of the individuals was saying that they have a gun. I immediately shared that information information with the dispatcher, and I just felt my heart drop in that moment. It was a frightening moment. I was instructed to stay on the phone, and I was giving the dispatcher as much information as I could, because, I have some background in that, and I know that all the details matter. So slide. Uh, while I was on the phone giving them the information, a plainclothes officer came in and he was directed to the location of the incident by our lovely CAs. Dispatch told me that that officer was actually the interim chief of campus safety. So as he was going downstairs through our main stairs, the person that was injured actually came up a different set of stairs with his hand wrapped in the bloody towels, and he was saying how the other person had his belongings and whatnot. The CAs did an amazing job and had him wait to the side. I told dispatch where the person was and that he was being compliant and he was in a new location where they could see him from the cameras. Campus safety did eventually show up. Most of them had gone downstairs, and a couple of them stayed upstairs to help the injured person. And as most of you may know, when there's a lot more people involved, things become a lot more convoluted. So that's around the time that things start getting a little confusing there. Slide. So I was still on the phone with dispatch at the time, and I had asked the officers that were present if they wanted me to tell dispatch to lock the building down. They said it was fine to just that we should just tell people not to come in and not let them in. Dispatch ended the call since campus safety had arrived. The officers told us that the suspect had barricaded himself downstairs and that they were waiting on Denver police to come and assist. One of the students who had heard the shouting that there might be a weapon, along with our CAs, I told them that they can go and wait in our conference room to be away from the danger/slash front desk. Um, the library staff were given the option to go home, but I was unsure of what the protocol was in terms of pay, and some of the students had just started their shifts. So I'm kind of in that middle management role where I don't quite have a say in do my students get paid or not, but more so that is above me. But I wanted to make sure that despite this incident, my students would get paid. I know it may not be a priority, but again, student workers, they are there for a reason. So next slide.
You got a little clap emoji for that, Nicole.
Oh, yay.
Many, many hearts and clap emojis.
Thank you. So Denver police and paramedics eventually arrived. Communication did get a lot more hectic at that time because around that time the alert was also sent out. Um, So around the time that the alert was sent out, that is when they decided to put the building on lockdown. So during this time, it was like I was trying to inform my immediate supervisor, giving statements to campus safety and Denver Police Department separately. We were getting phone calls about that incident from people calling to be let in that weren't seeing the alerts and staff members checking in as well. I was also trying to keep track of my staff and trying to see if there was any protocol or documentation in the emergency binder, like our emergency phone tree, or just something to tell me what to do in this case. Um, the campus safety officers and Denver police eventually came up with the suspect in handcuffs. They kept him in the lobby right in front of the desk, so it was very visible. I told any of the staff that had stayed at the desk that they can go to the back because the scene was pretty uncomfortable. Um, they eventually did take the handcuffed individual outside, and the injured person was eventually free to leave. Once the individuals were off the premises, the library admin who were outside were allowed in. And I think with that, we hand it off to Nina.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. All right, so I obviously came into all of this a little bit later. This this lovely alert came to my phone as it was, an early afternoon Saturday over the summer, just hanging out with my family, and I got this alert on my phone. DU alerts, stabbing at Anderson Academic Commons, suspect in police custody, no current threat to the community, stay clear of area until all clear notification. And this was what Nicole and John were both saying people were not seeing, because this is the text that went out to the whole campus community. So we received the oh, and so immediately texted my boss, who is the dean of the library, asked if he'd seen it. He was out walking his dog at the time. So the two of us decided that we should probably get down there. And the other person in the dean's office is our building and operations manager. So again, we received that DU alert at the same time everybody else is. And, we totally understand that. We know they can't be like, excuse me, Dean of the Libraries, are you aware that there's, this event going on? But just to share with you like how this was presented to me, how I found out about it. So I called the access desk immediately. John, I think that was our first conversation ever, as it was your first day. And John described to me, he conveyed that the staff were okay, that campus security and Denver police were on site, and things more or less seemed under control at that point. We were off the X, we were past the actual violence happening. But again, now we enter this weird like uncomfortable like limbo zone. So again, I texted my colleagues, the dean and our operations manager, and we came to campus ASAP to be on hand. I think it's funny too that Nicole mentioned that the admin were outside and not let in. I just blasted through the loading dock and came in that way. I probably shouldn't have more on that, but I just was very concerned and I wanted to be there. So I badged myself in through the loading dock and came around to the access department. But I would not have done that if I had not known that the building was safe. More on that in a little bit. So we did, as mentioned, we did close the building and we did send all the staff home with pay. Again, I'll talk about this more later, but my biggest regret in all of this is that the administration initially, we asked staff, we asked John and Nicole and all of their colleagues to make that decision, to make the call. Do you feel comfortable staying open or not? It was meant to be supportive. It was meant to offer autonomy, but it put very weird and unfair pressure on access staff, especially considering that John and these other two students who were at the desk in the three spots, the three seats on the front desk, it was their first day. So yeah, again, more on that later. And part of the rationale for this too, again, I'm sure many of you in the audience have experienced the adrenaline crash or events like this. So when your sympathetic nervous system stops that fight or flight response, it results in a lot of really undesirable physical manifestations. And if that happened to our folks, we wanted them to be at home in a safe place with their people. If that happened. And so we did send everybody home with full pay for their shifts, even the people who had just clocked in, even the evening staff who had not arrived yet. And that also included, it was mostly access services folks, John and Nicole and their team. But on the weekends, we do have a graduate reference employee at the research center, which is just past, in that picture that John shared, which is just past the circulation desk, kind of around the corner. Yeah, so everybody was fully compensated, even if their shift had not started yet. And then, so my boss and our budget and operations manager, we stayed on site for a pretty long time afterwards to kind of help close the building. I did a sweep. There were maybe about 24 people in the building. And we did, a PA announcement, like the normal sort of way of telling people that the building is closing. And then we worked with housekeeping to go down to that area of the lower level where the stabbing had happened and help identify the areas that needed cleaned up. And then we made sure that we had closure notices both on the library's website and then on the front door. All right. And I just wanted to make one point about the identifying areas to clean. In addition to just knowing that we were doing the right thing by the folks who were affected in closing the building, as the dean and I, and then Nicole's boss, who's another supervisor in access services, we were downstairs trying to help the housekeeping staff identify areas to clean. This is the one place where I'm describing the crime scene a little bit. When when blood leaves the human body, even through a relatively small wound, such as a stab on the hand, it does so enthusiastically. So while there were little spots everywhere, I'll leave it at that. And that's the end of my description of the crime scene, I promise. All right. So, not surprisingly, as the title says, we made the news. So this is a still from the Fox 31 affiliate in Denver. It's sort of alarming to see your institution's logo with, in this little logo that they made for the news that says DU stabbing. So now we're going to turn to that media coverage, and John is going to start us off with that.
Yeah, so as you heard from Nina there, the event was reported widely across Denver metro news outlets, both online and in the evening broadcasts. As you can see here, the details and the language used to describe the individuals in a lot of the headlines only just amplified the concern around campus and in the community. Um, yeah, I'll let you read those, but slide. In addition to that, we also had some Reddit threads that were posted. I know one of the more popular ones was the one that said anyone have details on the DU library, the stabbing in the DU library today. And as in typical Reddit fashion, you can see the various comments, either toxic or supporting there. And on the bottom there, we had some support for the libraries saying that they should remain open instead of just toxicity. So that was nice. Slide.
All right, and here we are over to Nicole, because we'll talk about how Access Services responded to those things John told us about, what that created.
Yeah, so in response to all the media coverage that we were getting, we kind of prepared to continue receiving inquiries, which we did receive a lot of phone calls and people in person asking about events that happened, if it's still safe to come on campus, the condition of the victims, and things like that, which honestly fair. Humans are naturally curious people. Um, I looked at the statistics, and in our logged interactions for the next 4 days, uh, about 6.4% of those interactions were in regards to the incident. And that is that some of those interactions might not have been logged during busier times, so the actual number may be a lot higher, which I genuinely do believe it is because I was talking to a lot of our students while putting this together, and a lot of them mentioned how they were getting asked about the incident outside of work from people that they just knew, or people who knew that they worked at the library and just wanted more details. So we kind of prepared for a lot of the negativity as well of like, why do you allow homeless in the library? So as library employees, it is our personal philosophy to serve all. One of DU's logos is we are a private university for the public good. Um, During this time, we did also get an uptick of concerns and reports about patrons perceived to be unhoused and like silly questions like, are the metal detectors working? Which, as some of y'all may know, the detectors are really just for the tattle tape for books. And no, they were not working. Slide. So in preparation for this, we did script answers on our LibGuide to help staff answer consistently with the appropriate level of detail. Um, we wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on the fact that there, in fact, was no gun. There were knives, but no gun. People were also asking, is the library open? We did reopen the following day for our normal operating hours, and we expected that to be the case moving forward. So that was the answer that we were given, or that we were giving to people asking. Um, Another one that we got also was kind of, why could these people just walk in? So we scripted the answer. The building is currently unlocked from open to 8 p.m. DU's motto is a great private university dedicated for the public good. As with most university libraries in the state, we're open to our alumni and the rest of the general public because we wanted to keep the building open and operational for everybody. Next.
All right. So now a little bit from what I saw in kind of the following week in library administration. So alarmingly, initially, okay, fine, they sent the alert to all of campus. They're not going to contact the administration before they send the alert to all of campus, just telling them to stay away. But in the communication after the event too, starting on, so it was the event was a Saturday, so we started communicating about it a little bit via email on Sunday and then in person on Monday when we were back in the office. So we were left out of the loop. My boss, the dean, was left out of the loop. There was a conversation initiated in email among other university admins about restricting building access. And again, this did not involve anybody from the dean's office at the library. So my boss very swiftly corrected that and got himself invited into that conversation. So we did also meet with that interim campus security chief the following Friday to debrief, and he filled in some further details that were really helpful. And we went into that meeting. That Reddit thread threw me for a loop, y'all. I gotta say, I was like, we are gonna have to like have all the bullet points in a row about, we're going to have to fight to stay open. We're really going to have to throw down with security about this. It turned out we didn't need to. And more about that on my next slide. And the other thing we kind of prepared for is that we were prepared for uncomfortable conversations with concerned parents. Because our fall quarter doesn't start until after Labor Day, we were in sort of that. I think summer semester was probably over by then. Do either of you remember, John or Nicole? It was very close to the end, and we don't have a very big summer quarter. So there were not a lot of people there. Had it happened 3 weeks later, that might have been another issue. We do, because we are a somewhat expensive private institution. We do sometimes get concerns about parents that are, quite frankly, a little bit entitled um, in relation to people that they feel should not be in the building. So we have kind of a set way to approach that. And my approach to that was going to be that, it's my workspace, it's a safe space. This doesn't happen very often. We've never had an incident like this on campus at DU before. And just some empathy around. I'm a parent myself. The week after this was when they had those swatting incidents at multiple college campuses across the country, and I got a text from two of my kids that they were on lockdown in Boulder because that was happening there. So I can sympathize with the parents, and that's normally our process for doing that. But again, we didn't have to, because this would have been very different had it happened, a couple weekends later. All right. So when we did have the conversation with the interim campus security chief, I got a lot more information that was helpful to me on what is their standard procedure and actually how they didn't follow it that day. And you might remember Nicole mentioned in her description that a plainclothes officer came in the building. It was actually him, like Nicole said, and he just happened to be out on a jog and going by the building and realized something was happening. So he did kind of apologize to us. He's like, I saw something, I wanted to help, but it wasn't like their normal protocol. He did have very high praise for access services staff and said that their response was good, balanced, good job of sharing known facts, and that they maintained composure. And I also got a better understanding of the relationship of what happens when Denver police shows up too, and that's campus safety becomes support when they arrive. And the interim chief did tell us, he told the dean's office admin folks that, libraries only work when they're open. They did not want to dictate a change in spite of this weird nebulous conversation that had started happening above my boss's head at the beginning of the week. All right, so we're going to go back into, okay, we're 12:18, we're doing good on time. We're going to go back into those 5/6 principles at this point, and John is going to talk about safety and peer support. Then Nicole will cover trustworthiness and transparency, as well as collaboration and mutuality, and then I will do the last two, which again are empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. So again, this is us trying to evaluate our response and what we did well in this framework and what we want to explore for the future. So John, talk to us about safety.
Thanks, Nina. Yeah, so we got together, we discussed safety. One of the highlights was not panicking. I remember Nicole just kind of giving basic, clear instructions, not overly like raising voices or freaking anybody else out. What little training I did have, we followed that training and just relayed information as best and calmly as possible. What we'd like to explore further is better communication during the event, as far as communicating to patrons, some sort of signage that says, in addition to the text alert, but like stay out, keep out, because I was also answering phones and talking to just regular students who were asking why they couldn't come in. So that was just taking up, precious communication time. Another thing we discussed was just testing the communication lines in the event, you do get a VoIP phone system. It's kind of useful to figure out how that phone call is actually connected and made, so you get a feel of that, and you can actually speak to campus safety, just practicing. Um, yeah, and then also DU has a campus safety emergency app, installing that and just running through different, pushing the buttons and just testing out the app to get familiar with it. So when things like this happen, you're familiar and you don't have to say, and you waste time. Um, and then, yeah, what is it, like I said, what does it feel like to get that phone to like let it connect first and then start pushing all the buttons? Slide. In addition to this, the next one would be peer support. We discussed what it will was that the supervisors and the library administrators showed up. They showed up for their people and they were supportive of their people instead of just trying to call in and get answers and then make decisions from a phone call. They actually showed up for the people, and that meant a lot for someone like me. Uh, Connected people with resources as well. I do remember campus safety officers coming up to us at the desk asking if we were okay. They also said, there are resources available if you need them. In addition to this, our Access Services Department head sent out an email compiling all kinds of support services available to us. And then in addition to this, we also received an email from our provost just checking up on us and touching base. What we'd like to explore further is just adding more concrete physical and mental health resources and support uh, readily available for emergency response situations like this, reference sheets, just something to just kind of help a little further. But yeah, slide.
All right. In terms of trustworthiness and transparency, the things that we felt went well, we did develop the content that was shared on LibGuides for the staff to use in answering the patron questions that were being asked about the incident. So that was ready, available, consistent, and concise. We focused on what we were allowed to say in a way that protected the privacy of the people involved, because even though this was all over the news, people still have the right to their privacy. We did have dean's office conversations with campus security and university admin, including being prepared to address the concerns of the parents, as Nina had mentioned. What we wish we could explore further is building those relationships between the libraries and the Department of Campus Safety, especially now that there's a new chief in place. So any questions that we have left, we are still in communication with these folks and trying to get these answers put together in case we are ever to face another similar situation, which hopefully we do not. Um, but yeah, slide. And then collaboration and mutuality. What we did well, we did decide to close the building and pay staff. But as Nina mentioned as well, the library admin should not have put that decision on staff, and they have taken that critique very well. Thank you very much. What we want to explore further would be conversations with campus safety about what our roles are and who decides to close the building, what are responsibilities and what are theirs. So just to have our ducks in a row, to make sure we know who's supposed to be doing what and just to not have so much overlap and confusion in the moment. Yeah.
All right, so last two are for me here, empowerment, voice, and choice. So what we did very well, the circulation supervisor, aka Nicole, did a really great job communicating to folks. John mentioned that earlier. She was very calm, she was very clear, and just giving staff permission to leave. She empowered them to do that, to make that choice if they were not comfortable and if they wanted to leave the scene, that was fine. One thing that we thought we would want to explore further is we know who was involved on our end, but I was thinking more about like the students who ran up, and I assume that campus security has their names and knows to follow up with them. We know that that's not necessarily our responsibility, but I'm just curious a little bit more about how they're cared for, because even though they're not our staff, they're still part of the community we serve. And I would want to make sure that those two students who run up, who had just thought that they did hear, who thought they were running upstairs to report that there was about to be a shooting in the library, because there's got to be some trauma from that too. So I just wanted to know more about how they would be supported. Again, I don't know. I know it's not necessarily our responsibility, but I am curious about that. Okay, so finally, the mysterious last principle that we will not ignore because it has to do with cultural, historical, and gender issues. Again, we are not going to change our access policies based on one incident. And one thing that we think we can do further about this is educate folks more about why we do not want to change our access policies. Again, that interim campus security, who's the deputy, he's gone back to the deputy now that we have the new chief. He had that wonderful quote that libraries only work when they're open. So we were not going to, and again, I would add to this slide too, it's kind of a duplicate, but like Nicole said, protecting the identities and the privacy of the folks that were involved as well. We want to, as part of the definition of this principle, we want to move past those stereotypes and biases and not be reactive and let that dictate our normal operating procedures. All right, so we're gonna wrap up here the last 5 minutes or so with each of our takeaways. So we'll start again with John.
Yeah, so what main takeaway I first thought of was just don't panic. Follow your training the best of your ability, even if it's your first day. Try to be really realistic about what you can do. We are not security. Rely on your team and your supervisors. Just remember you're not alone. And to know where your phone numbers are, what means of contact you have. Be familiar with your lib answers and all of your reference points, checking that emergency lines and work phone change. Pre-programmed numbers were gone. So just kind of ask questions if you don't quite understand how this big fancy phone sitting in front of you works. Be curious. Write down details as the events are happening. Get in there and that lib answers, and that'll help with the digital timestamp. And if all else fails, pen and paper, and then just follow up with supervisors and safety officers. Yeah.
All right, thanks, John. And here are Nicole's takeaways.
So my biggest takeaway, remaining calm as you can be, model that calm behavior for your staff. As a supervisor, I was the only supervisor in the building as this was happening. So just trying to remember that I'm human, my staff is human, everybody is going to react differently to these things. But trying to rely on those procedures in place helps, but it's not always black and white in the moment. You have to be flexible with what is going on with the information that as it's coming to you. Um, do what you think is best to keep yourself and your staff safe. Again, I was as the supervisor there, I wanted to make sure that my students were safe and also that I was doing what I can to provide as much information to our security as possible. Um, I again, prior training, I was writing things down so because I knew I would be asked to do the incident report. So having uh, the footprint of what was happening, just to go back to and refer back to it helps both internally to the library and externally for campus safety when getting asked about those details. Because as you know, in the moment, um, during events like this, your brain can become quite scrambled. And then, yeah, just trying to be supportive to the witnesses and anybody around in the area, encouraging them to provide information again, as long as they feel safe doing so. That is my biggest thing. Like, I did ask the people who, or one of the students who had come up to the desk saying that they heard the gun, that one of the individuals had a gun to stay, but I did give her that option of if you feel comfortable doing so, would you mind staying? And same thing with my staff. Like if you all would want to stay until I get an answer on if you're getting paid or not, wait in the conference room away from everything. But yeah, just trying to be as supportive as I can and remembering that again, we're all human. Yeah.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, so Nina's takeaways. So first and foremost, show up for your people. I got that text and I panicked. It's probably a good thing that John and Nicole were there because I panicked and left immediately. I'm about a 15-minute drive from campus, so I got up and I left immediately. But if something does happen, be present, be there for your folks. And again, assuming it's safe to do so, I probably should have waited outside in the front of the building. But I panicked. So it's good that Nicole and John were there when it was actually happening. And I went around our main entrance is on the the south side of the building. I went around to the loading dock on the east side and came in that way. And I got a weird look from one of the officers who was going through there. But I was like, I'm the associate dean. This is my department. This is my team. I have to check on them. And he didn't bat an eye, but I probably should have waited. So a big takeaway for me was what violence looks like or what violence doesn't look like. Because when you see that text and you see the word stabbing, I'm imagining, like, I'm imagining like in a movie, like a body on the floor, with a growing pool of blood or something like that. It did not look like that. And it did not, the reaction of the folks around it, it didn't look like that to them either. There were a couple of students studying. It happened in this sort of big open area with some kind of study carrels. And some of the students were not aware it was happening and stayed there. And when we swept to close the building, we actually we actually got people being a little snippy with us because they hadn't seen the text and they were like, well, why do we have to leave? It's the building's supposed to be open today. And we would just say there was an incident, we plan on opening at our usual time at 10 a.m. tomorrow. So, you might have in your head what you think, violence looks like a John Wick movie or something like that, but it really didn't. And, again, until John and Nicole looked at those screens and confirmed, they were so far removed, they couldn't hear the shouting in a big building. You could have something going on like that. Nicole, I think you described, or John, I think you described it as like this weird silent fight going on the screen. So again, my biggest lesson was just close the building, just make the decision to close from the top down. Don't put that decision in the in the hands of the people, the student employees whose first day it is. And again, that's probably my biggest lesson learned here. It's also important, obviously, for the library leadership to engage afterwards in revising or not revising policies and procedures and making sure that that conversation is not happening somewhere else, again, above my boss, the dean's head. And we really wanted to, again, just ensure that when we are making decisions about access, that kind of thing, or not making changes in decisions, that we're in that picture. The library leadership is the one calling the shots. And then finally, the last thing, obviously, we've sort of reiterated it throughout. Communication with campus security is so critical. And again, we're just working to maintain ongoing communication. We had that debrief with the interim acting, but we're still continuing the communication, not just post-incident at all levels of the library organization. In fact, we're having the new chief is going to come to our all hands meeting next week to talk to us. And one thing I didn't put it in a bullet point here, but another thing that was eye-opening for me, I've been doing this associate dean thing for almost 2 years now, so I'm still getting used to being in this administrative role. Be aware, I wrote this down to make sure I say it tactfully. Be aware that your conversations in the dean's office as an administrator may be very different from your team's conversations with other units on campus in tone, attitude, and content. So a conversation that feels very comfortable and happy to you, if that conversation is had with one of your teams, it might not come across the same way. And I will leave it at that. So as we were putting things together yesterday, John went into work and was taking some photos for us to include. And I thought this was just a great photo end. This is on the wall next to the access desk. And it would be ironic if we made sort of a reactive change, right? If this is what we're proclaiming, this is the screen you see when you walk in. This is a library, inspiring discovery, championing truth against rumor, defending intellectual freedom, protecting privacy open to all. This is a library at University of Denver, which is a private university for the public good. John and Nicole, any other last thoughts to add?
No, I think that was great.
Yeah, I
Thank you
think
so
you got it all.
much.
All right, Nicole, Nina, and John, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. I think so many of us sort of dealt with variations on this theme and hearing about your experience, and I especially appreciated hearing the multiple perspectives that you all brought to the reflection. I think that was a unique and really awesome way to do this presentation. So thank you.
Yeah.
And we have about 10 minutes for questions, and we do have a number of questions from our audience. So we'll start with the first one from Heather. Are there thoughts or discussions around additional alternative methods of communication with the experience of the team's phones resetting after an update? What happens if the internet goes down and staff need to contact campus safety?
And that is part of, in my initial conversation that I had with the new campus chief, that is part of what they see as the solution is that everyone has this DU Safe app on their phone. The nice thing about it is because yeah, like John was pointing out, if it's a voice over IP phone and as Nicole experienced, we had just replaced these Cisco phones with this new Microsoft Teams, so there had been this big change. The app is designed to be on individual cell phones, and one of the nice things about it is that you can do it sort of surreptitiously. So if John had been up front, talking to the students and Nicole is kind of there, you can open your phone and, you can text campus security, you can call them if you can, go around a corner where if it is better in the situation that you're in, not to do that. That is campus safety's take on it, and I really do want to know more about this app that they're rolling out. I think that would prevent some of it. Um, but yeah, again, we're learning more about this now.
Awesome. Thank you.
And
All right.
it does offer multiple ways. You can call, you can text. So if like one line of communication is not working.
Yeah, I really appreciate they have the text option
Yeah.
for our safety as well now.
Yeah.
Um, okay. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. Access services staff often face more burnout from events like this and the fear of being on the front line. How do you suggest that library admin and leadership can support these staff members in these situations? Great question.
Yeah. John or Nicole, do you want to take a stab at this first?
So
Go ahead, Nicole.
I was gonna say I'm still like middle management, but I feel like just being the supervisor for the circulation assistants, which are the frontline people there, I just did what I could to make sure that they felt as supported throughout the incident and giving them the choice of if you want to stay, stay. If you want to go, go. And I will get back to you about things that are important, like getting paid or not. And then after the incident, after everything calmed down, just providing the resources to them of, hey, here's the student mental health lines. Here's free resources available to you as students and student workers that you can reach out to at no cost. And if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to these resources, you can come talk to me or to any of the other supervisors here who are more than happy to be there for you in any way that we can. And yeah, just trying to be present, be there, and support them in any way that I could.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that at all levels of leadership showed up and checked in with me and just made sure that things were okay. So that really left an impression on me.
Yeah. And again, I felt like the best thing we did was just get there as soon as we can. And I remember thinking as I drove there, I'm like, we need to pay everybody for today because the question talked about the access and frontline staff being vulnerable. They're often part-time or hourly positions as well, and it is not fair for them to not get their usual paycheck for something that was completely out of their control and something that was so negative and awful. So that was another decision that I think was really good. There was never any question of whether we would pay the folks or not, even folks who were just getting there or even the evening shift that hadn't arrived yet. And I think just again ensuring those conversations, and again a big lesson for me back to that last point that I made, the way the way some of our campus partners talk to me as an administrator is different sometimes than the way that, and I was very disappointed to hear how representatives from campus safety talk to access services, and that's something that I want to pursue with the new chief as well. Just ensuring that their voices are all being heard and that they are getting the same kind of audience, because it was very disturbing to me that I had this very positive feel good conversation, and based on what was shared with me by the access librarian who's over access services, that was not not the case when the follow-up meeting happened with, because I asked, I said, hey, can you meet with our access folks too? And just listen, have regular check-ins, make sure folks are getting what they need. And I don't think you can overdo it on the check-in thing, just making sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for addressing that question. The next question is also from an anonymous attendee. Did the pre-scripted LibGuide answers generally help with at the desk questions? Were there questions from patrons that surprised staff or administration? I can only imagine.
Nicole, do you want to take this one?
I believe that having the pre-scripted answers did help, just because there were probably students at the desk who weren't there at the time or weren't even on campus at that time because we were still in that break time, who had no clue as to what happened or the details of that day. So having the transparent questions with as much information as we could give out while still maintaining the privacy was helpful. Um, I think as for questions that surprised staff or admin, just I can't think of any off the top of my head at this moment. I think
Metal detector one is always funny.
yeah, I think the
That's not
Reddit
a
thread kind of
four.
prepared us for as many questions as we could. Yeah, John, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I don't remember anything particularly crazy being asked over the phone, but I just remember, people coming up and being like, "Fight, huh? What happened?" And like, just it was easy just to say like a quick 5 lines, and they'd be like, "Oh, okay," and then they're just on their way instead of like getting into it
Mm.
or getting into a full-on conversation on the phone. That it really helped having that script because even the extra stuff that I maybe wanted to share, sometimes I was just limited with that script, so it kept it really concise.
Yeah. And I think even just one of the things that we sort of thought of is maybe having some guidelines on how to respond. Just be clear, be very concise, be very, and the great thing about the LibGuide that they worked on was that it was consistent, is that if someone asked John, if someone asked, whoever was at the desk, that canned but complete and transparent answer was there for everybody to use. Because again, it might be, started in the frame of a casual conversation like John just mentioned. Hey, so I heard there was a fight. And if you have a standard way to respond, you can shut down any further speculation about, oh, I heard there was a gun. Nope, no gun. And end of story, no gun. And just again, having everybody be able to give the same answer and kind of not get sucked into potentially weird questions.
All right. Yes. I'm glad to hear that there weren't super weird questions. That's awesome. Okay. I think we have time for maybe one more question. So from Elise, are you going to or have you added additional training for staff in response to this event?
Nicole, I'll defer to you because I know what we had was really great. Yeah, is that okay, Nicole? Do you want to take
Yeah,
this?
so um, I think it was more so we haven't officially added anything, but we are still waiting to meet with the new chief of campus safety to get clarification um, on what to do if this were to happen again. Because again, the training that we have is usually like mild incidents to active harmer situations, but nothing for really in between. That was really just being more flexible thinking on the spot, which apparently I did very well.
You did. They praised you highly, Nicole.
Um, but it would be nice once we have the official answers from campus safety to include that in our training for our students as the
Mhm.
frontline workers.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we are about out of time for today. So I just want to say thank you again, John, Nina, and Nicole. We really appreciate your presentation. We'll make sure that you get the rest of the Q&A as well if you'd like to take a look at those.
Yeah, that'd be
Attendees, as you close out the window, you'll get a feedback survey link. Please fill it out. Feedback is a gift to our presenters. I know they'll appreciate it. And then we'll be back together at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I hope to see you at the last concurrent session of the day. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Nicole.
Bye.